So there's a Roman Catholic Jesuit priest named Walter Burghardt, and he was a pretty well-known preacher, and he preached a sermon once in which he told a fable. And this fable has roots in Islam. It's a fable, and again, we know that fables teach us, and they're supposed to be timeless classics that teach us about ourselves in the modern day. And I love this fable because it's about a king. It's a king named Abraham. And this King Abraham has everything that he could ever want, wealthy by every standard. And he had all that he could ever ask for. And yet he had this hole in his life, and he just felt unfulfilled. So he decided that he was going to search for God. And as the king, he made a grand statement and a grand proclamation to all of his kingdom that he was now searching for God, and he expected them to do the same. And that night, feeling very good about himself and very good about this proclamation that he made, he laid down in his bed to sleep. And of course, he was laying in his silk pajamas in his fine golden lace bed. And as he laid there, all of a sudden, there was this clamoring on the roof, banging, battering, something was up there, knocking and banging, and he couldn't sleep. And he got very frustrated very quickly. And he went over to the window and he pushed it open and he yelled out there, "Who is it? Who's up there? What are you doing?" And the voice cried back, "Well, it is I, the shaman." No, a shaman is just a fancy word for a priest. And so he was just kind of the clergy person. I'm the pastor up here. And then, "What are you doing up there?" And he said, "Well, I've lost my camel, so I'm searching for it on your roof." And the King Abraham was indignant. "A camel? You're searching for a camel on the roof? You search for a camel? You fool! Looking for a camel on the roof." And without any fanfare, and very calmly, the shaman spoke back, "Oh, you fool, for you are looking for God in your silk pajamas, in your golden lace bed." It teaches us this about our very privileged North American experience of Christianity. And it teaches us how we are to search. The fable that Burkhardt tells ends with that those words so cut King Abraham's heart that he then changed his ways, renounced the opulence of his life, and became an ardent server of the poor. This is a story about how we search. And in this New Year's, this is what we do. We search. We make resolutions to find things. And the question becomes where we search and how we search. These are the things. And we generally search poorly on both accounts. We oftentimes search for the wrong things in the wrong places, and we search the wrong way. And we then get frustrated. I don't know what your New Year's resolutions are. Could be for wealth, could be for health, could be for a number on a scale that would make you happy. Could be for overall fitness and health. You could be searching for God. I'm just telling you that whatever you're searching for, where and how you search, these things are the key. Well, it's Epiphany, and so we're talking about the Magi as they come and visit the manger. And every year I try to explain, when I have the privilege of preaching on Epiphany, I always try to make sure we understand what the Magi are, because what they were, who they were, and how we have culturally changed them, there's a big gap between those two things. So, Magi, the word actually comes from a place in Persia, Magia, and so mostly what we know about them is that they were Persian. We assume that they were astrologers because they were following a star, which wouldn't make them particularly wise, but would give them a skill set. The wisdom part of why we call them wise men actually comes from the text. Later in the text, when Herod's frustrated because he was outsmarted by them, he orders the slaughter of the innocents, the massacre of infants. And in verse 16, which we didn't get read, it says, when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, that's even noted that it says magi there, but we believe that they were smart enough to avoid Herod, and so we call them wise. That's kind of where that comes from. And we don't know if they were wise or not. Perhaps we can assume that they were, as they were indeed seeking Jesus. So maybe they were wise in that way. But the other thing that we believe about them is that they're kings. It's a little bit of a stretch, right? I think it's perfectly honest with you. I think the reason we call them kings is because the lyricist who wrote that stupid song needed one syllable rather than two, right? And so we don't know that they were kings. What we believe about them is that, again, they were astrologers, they were perhaps people of means, and because they got an audience with Herod, kings usually get audiences with other kings, and also perhaps because they had an audience with Jesus, King of the Jews and King of the world. We associate them as being kings when perhaps they weren't necessarily kings. But here's what we can say about them. We can say that they were driven. We have to admire their persistence. We have to admire how hard they sought God in the person of Jesus Christ. They sacrificed. They went on an extremely long, expensive in terms of time and effort and resources. We don't know if there were three of them. We assume that there were three because there were three gifts. There could have been a whole cohort of them, but they went on a very long, arduous trip, hundreds of miles, to find God. They sacrificed, and they gave of themselves in tremendous ways. That was very important to them. We could even say that they were in all likelihood foolish because, quite frankly, that was a trip that made no sense. They had no idea of where they were going. They had no idea that they would even find what they were looking for, and they went anyway. And you have to admire their desire. Unlike the fable that we talked about, King Abraham, they actually sacrificed to find God. And that was important to them. Well, the problem with our world today is that there is no sense of sacrifice. We believe, and we've been, again, as North Americans, in our quite honest, privileged and entitled way, we believe, in our heads anyway, that every problem has a solution, that every journey leads exactly where it's supposed to go, that every effort will reach its conclusion, that everything that is lost will be found. And we kind of get fed this line, if you will, that not only are we entitled to have all of those things happen, we're even entitled to have it happen easily. That we should never have to sacrifice, nor should we ever be inconvenienced. This bank ad sums it up so well, doesn't it? The convenience you deserve. We hear that all of the time. We are pummeled with messages like that. And I think we know in our heart of hearts that that isn't the way it works. But because we keep getting fed this message that we should never have to sacrifice, that nothing should ever be hard, we kind of get duped. And what I'm here to remind you of, folks, is that the journey is never about the destination. It's always about the ride, man. The joy is in the ride. That's why we do what we do. It's about the process. It's not about getting there. It's about the process of being present on the way there. And the Magi teach us this. I think a perfect example would be gold, right? We hear gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And I'm very grateful for our display here, except for a couple of things. One is, first of all, I'm not thrilled about the crown, because he wouldn't have been a king. But we have the gold with the one, we have the frankincense and the myrrh, but we have a box that's not just gold, but it's filled with pearls and other such things, because, I'm such a practical guy. If that was gold, he wouldn't be able to hold it. It would be too heavy. Certainly wouldn't be able to hold it with one arm, right? And so we have the Magi bringing these gifts. Now, I want you to think about gold for a second. When we think about the gold that gets harvested from the earth, we tend to think about it kind of, like this. Let's take a look. We tend to look at it as a coal train. Think of all the gold that gets harvested from the earth. Think of all of that mining. Right, we've all experienced a coal train, right? We've been stuck behind one that goes along for a mile, or we've ridden along next to one. Car after car after car filled with coal and coal and coal. It seems like it goes on forever. And that's just one of, I'm guessing, hundreds of thousands of coal trains that have gone across this nation in the history of our nation. And this is how we think of mining. This is how we think of it to be. But when you know the facts about gold, it's a little different. How much gold do you think has ever been mined from the earth, ever, in the history of the world? Well, it's a little less than you think, maybe a lot less. The amount of gold that's ever been mined from the earth would make up a cube that would be about 75 feet by 75 feet by 75 feet. It would be a cube roughly the size of the Family Life Center where you get the donut holes that you love so much. That room is the size of all of the gold that's ever been taken from the earth. Well, no wonder it's such a precious metal, right? It is not even the size of one of those coal cars that we saw in the previous shot. And the point is, reflect on all of the searching for the gold. This is a great metaphor for our lives as we search. People have searched and searched. As a matter of fact, think of all the gold rushes for so little. Think of the fact that, quite frankly, men have killed other men in the search of gold. And it's not plentiful. It's small. And I'm not trying to depress you on New Year's weekend, but it's not about the find. It's about the search. It's about the journey. Not nearly as much about the results. This is how it is with God's love. We can get so frustrated because we don't feel God's love the way we ought, because we just want to get to this place where we have it and we own it and we possess it. And that isn't how it works. We live and steward it and seek it and get glimpses of. And we steward that love, giving it and receiving it in kind. It's a rare thing. And we don't like that. Well, I know you're probably saying, you're talking like a fable, Pastor Greg. I don't get how this actually plays out in my life. And it's hard. It's nebulous. The example that I thought of this month, though, I think kind of works. I was thinking about Rob Reiner. Again, if you haven't heard, right, Rob Reiner, who is the son, he's Hollywood elite, the son of a actor, director, producer, comedian, and who himself became actor, director, producer, kind of comedian. Rob Reiner and his wife were murdered by their son. Tragically. He had mental health issues, he had chemical dependence issues, and wound up ultimately killing them. Rob Reiner was super successful. He was, I think, probably the most successful movie director in history for this reason. because he did so many different genres. There are people better than him in certain niches, but for Rob Reiner, he did every single genre of movies. And if you look at the top movies in every genre, you find one of his. And so how tragically to have he and his wife taken by their child. But it was after Christmas, and I was sitting around with my son. We were talking about this. I wanted to introduce my son to Rob Reiner, and it was almost New Year's, and one of the perfect New Year's movies is When Harry Met Sally. Now, some people who haven't seen them, watch the movies that I talk about from up here, and then they come to me and they say, that wasn't appropriate. No, it's not. Warning label. But it remains one of the greatest rom-coms ever made. And I don't know if you are aware of this, and my son loved it, by the way, but I don't know if you're aware of this, but Rob Reiner actually wrote and even filmed 3 endings to this movie. See, it's a movie about a man and a woman with kind of the, if you will, social experiment of whether or not a man and a woman can be friends without the romance getting in the way. And Rob Reiner conceptualized this movie because he had gotten divorced from his wife and he was alone. For 10 years, he was alone, looking for love and unable to find it. And so he did what he did, and he wrote a movie with Nora Ephron about this. And when he got to the end of the movie, they supposedly were going to have this falling out. They're going to have a little bit of romance. They have this falling out. And then years later, they were going to see each other. They were going to greet each other and walk in separate directions. And it just didn't work. Because, and here's the thing, he met his wife, Michelle Singer, in New York while filming the movie. This movie that was going to end lovelessly, he couldn't do it because he met and fell in love with his wife, the woman who would be the mother of his children, and they would be together until their deaths. And he said he filmed a second ending. It still didn't work. And then he sat down with Billy Crystal, the star of the movie, and Billy mostly wrote the end of it, including that incredibly beautiful line, which is when you meet the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. Rob Reiner, who was raised Jewish as a man of faith, went through a phase in which he kind of renounced faith, but then in the end said that he not only was a believer, but he was a believer in the teachings of Jesus to love one's neighbor and to forgive. This man, in the process of searching, ultimately found. And it was about the search, not about the find. So on this New Year's weekend, when you've made your decisions about what you're going to be searching for, what you're resolved to do, I would say be careful where and how, and to mostly focus on the where and how. You don't want your New Year's resolutions to end after 3 months like most of them do. And if you're going to be searching for God, I can tell you have a better chance of finding a camel on the roof than God while you're stuck in your own home. Live your life searching and stewarding the love of God. And I pray to God that it will come back to you. Happy New Year. Let's be in prayer.